Hello and welcome to Paul on Politics, our regular review of all the political news and analysis live on KMTV. Now, it's been another busy week in Kent on the political front, with the county taking centre stage at Prime Minister's Questions, where the Ashford MP Damien Green was deputising for Prime Minister Theresa May. And the state of the NHS in Kent and reorganisation plans for 3 hospitals saw Mr Green and Labour stand-in Emily Thornberry crossing swords on the issue. On the sofa with us to discuss the week's events are Simon Cook, the Conservative leader of Canterbury City Council, and Tim Lukchurst, Professor of Journalism at the University of Kent. Thanks to both of them for coming in. Now, there's an old joke that you wait an hour for a bus and then 3 come along at the same time, but in Kent you might soon be finding out that you wait an hour for a bus and none come along. The County Council is considering lopping £4 million from its transport budget and ending subsidies for 78 buses that serve isolated communities and villages and help those without access to any other form of transport get around. The authority says it can no longer afford to provide the services, and somewhat inevitably it has created a furore. Poppy Jeffrey has the story.
Plans to make cuts to bus service subsidies in Kent have been widely criticised by politicians, both locally and nationally. Kent County Council announced plans to cut £4 million worth of subsidies affecting the whole county. The issue was brought before the House of Commons by MP for Canterbury, Rosie Duffield, yesterday at the PMQs. The MP asked Damien Green, First Secretary of State and representative for Ashford, whether he supported the cuts.
As the First Secretary of State will know, being my near neighbour in Kent, as a result of underfunding, the Conservative County Council has run out of cash and is cutting the funding of buses in Kent by 70%. Wow. 4 hospital buses, 14 school buses and over 100 other routes are to be cut. Thousands of pensioners, especially those in rural areas, are to be trapped at home. Does the Right Honourable Member for Ashford really support such cuts?
Secretary. I do not recognise the characterisation of Kent County Council's position, which my constituency neighbour has expressed. All local authorities, as all parts of the public sector, have to live within their means, because we have to continue paying down the deficit that was run up by the previous Labour government.
There were calls for public reassurance as Kent County councillors debated the proposals earlier today. Members spoke about possible cuts and raised concerns about the scale of the plans. Meanwhile, bus company Arriva, which would be affected, said as one of the largest bus operators in Kent, Arriva does have concerns for some of the services that are supported by KCC and cover the more rural areas. This is Poppy Jeffrey for KMTV in Maidstone.
Well, Simon, let's go to you first. You're a Conservative council leader. Are your colleagues at County Hall doing the right thing here?
Well, I think it's not my position to defend KCC. They can perfectly happy to do that themselves. But I think it's a very emotive subject, and I think it's one of those where the devil is in the detail. Absolutely, it's right and proper that they look at whether public money is being spent appropriately, but equally, it may well be that this is something that the local authorities are supposed to be doing. Most bus services run at a profit, the market provides them. Some where they're sorely needed may need a subsidy.
But these are what are described as socially necessary bus services, not socially desirable bus services.
No, I agree entirely. And the issue of whether or not children can get to school and so forth, that's a key one. And I think KCC should be looking properly at this. The issue at the moment is they're putting it out to consultation. That's the right thing to do. Whether or not they're saying...
We know what's going to happen with the consultation. There'll be a backlash. People will say they don't want their services being cut, and KCC will say, well, sorry, we've got no choice.
Well, in that case, that's an entirely different way of doing consultations than we have at Canterbury City Council, where we listen to the public and we reflect on what they say.
Come on, do you really think that if thousands of people sign a petition or respond to the consultation and say, we don't want this to happen, KCC is going to say, OK, we'll find some other way of saving the money?
Well, who can say what KCC will do? But the point is, it's not a question of signing a petition, it's a question of looking at it and saying, actually, you're wrong on this, and here's why you're wrong. That's what good responses to consultations are, and good councils listen to those.
Tim, what's your take on this? Is this a cut too far?
It might be a cut too far, Paul, because there is the question as to whether providing these essential services, particularly the delivery of children to schools, might cost more if the bus services were withdrawn than it currently costs with the buses. But I think there's a bigger issue. I think the County Council has to be candid about its options. Yes, there's a period of austerity. Yes, it's receiving less than it would like to receive from central government. But of course, it does have the option of increasing local taxation if it regards these services as essential.
That's always a dangerous thing, isn't it?
Well, that's always a tough one for councillors to think about, isn't it? But it is, of course, the one that councillors like to avoid talking about, particularly, I think, at KCC. It's always blamed on government cuts, but they do also have tax-raising powers themselves. They could use them occasionally.
Simon, I know you keep saying you're not part of KCC, but imagine you were leader of Kent County Council. Would you?
Just imagine.
Would you be considering what Tim's suggesting? Why not raise a bit more revenue from your council taxpayers?
I think that's very much a last resort. Councils have looked at this, as you'll know. Over an increase of 2%, you have to have a local referendum. That more or less
which costs a lot of money.
Which costs about 1% of your income to run. It is no council has yet had such a referendum and won it. I think a couple of councils have tried it, they lost. Other councils have gone, well, frankly, people don't vote for increasing taxes. But there again,
this is a problem, isn't it, Tim?
People don't vote for raising taxes in general elections either, and that's the problem. And I'd actually like to see a local council testing this. After all, if the response to the consultation is that local people regard these services as essential, then isn't it legitimate to ask local people, OK, if they're essential, are you prepared to pay for them?
And this is a fair enough point. It's going to the electorate and saying, if we have two choices, either we raise council tax, here's a referendum, or we don't, and we cut these services. Electorate have grown up, they can make those choices themselves, and it's not unreasonable to be honest with them.
And I think that's a very honest way to approach it.
It's honest, but the real politic, if you like, is that politicians don't like doing that sort of thing because they know what kind of reaction they'll get.
Yes, but I think if you're honest and open with the electorate and say, frankly, we're about choices now. We can't do everything. Which ones do you want us to do?
Is it more honest, Paul, always to say that this is the fault of central government? Because that's becoming the fallback position in local government throughout the United Kingdom.
Absolutely.
It's always central government's fault. Well, actually, if local democracy matters, and I think it does, then local democracy should take hard decisions.
Do you think local councils have got the necessary wherewithal and the autonomy to do that?
Well, I think they can. I mean, we saw it in Surrey last year that they threatened a 15% hike and were about to have a referendum.
But that was a bit of sabre rattling, wasn't it?
Well, really? Perhaps it was, and perhaps Kent should investigate doing the same as well. It's a bigger council even than Surrey. They have great political clout. I'm sure they're listened to in the halls of government. Well,
that'll be an interesting proposition if they do take up that idea. We'll have to end that debate now for the time being, but it's going to go on, I'm sure. Now, Brexit was supposed to be saving the UK money, but this week's reports emerged that the divorce bill could be as much as £54 billion, or is it euros? So, is that value for money, and who will get the record collection at the end of it all? We went to Maidstone to find out what you think.
If it has to be paid, it has to be paid. Let's get on with it. But basically, I think it's all a waste of money and we should have just stayed in.
I'm not happy about it at all. I really don't think we've had value for money in the first place, and it just seems yet one more expense that we really shouldn't have.
I think it's brilliant. It's bad in the short term, but it's a minor figure for what we're saving and what we could potentially save further down the line.
I think it's ridiculous. We can spend £44 billion on other stuff like the NHS, like especially for our department. We're both partially deaf and we're risking our department in the adult sector to be private.
Well, I think it's absolutely disgusting. Why should we have to buy ourselves out of something that we should never have been in the first place? Because at the end of the day, this is our country. Why have we got to keep paying for other countries? We shouldn't have to.
I would think that we need to just buy them off to get some trade deals.
Well, I didn't vote to leave, so you can probably imagine my thoughts. We should have stayed in. We should have changed. You can't make any changes to anything that you're not part of.
Well, Tim, It's a huge sum of money. Do you think people who voted to leave anticipated that this would be the size of the divorce bill?
No, I don't think people who voted to leave did anticipate that this would be the size of the divorce bill, but nor do I think that this is the actual divorce bill, because what the European Commission and the British government have actually negotiated is not a sum, it's a methodology. And clearly the government's intention is to work out exactly what basis they're going to be paying money to the European Union on after Britain leaves, and then to try and negotiate that down and to say, no, we didn't commit to paying for European Commission's pensioners for the next 30 years, and we don't think we will pay for their pensions for the next 30 years. This is about giving the government some wriggle room. So yes, it's a bigger commitment than anyone expected, but then during the referendum, I don't think anyone expected to pay anything, Paul, so any increase in the payment, which was always inevitable, was going to be a surprise.
And your party's fervent Brexiteers, Simon, always said they're not going to hand over any cash at all, and now it looks like they will have to.
Well, I think actually some of them are on record as saying they will honour legal obligations. And that's a perfectly reasonable point of view. But I think the key issue on this is no one is writing a cheque. This is money that will be paid over many years.
It's the nasty old media presenting it as a one-off payment.
And £54 billion is an extraordinary amount of money, and we don't know how big it really will be.
It would pay for a lot of bus services, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but this is being paid over. This is being paid over very many years, and this is not £54 billion in one go straight away, and you could build whatever with it. It's money that will be paid over very many years, and frankly, as Tim has said, it is a methodology. It's not an actual thing. In the same way, we've seen numbers from 40 billion to 100 billion bandied around. These are all complete guesswork.
How do you think Theresa May's playing this? Is she negotiating well, or is she
briefly? I think there's a way to work it out, Paul. If the net annual cost of paying this methodology is less than Britain currently pays into the European Union, I think it will fly well with the Conservative benches. If it's more, I think that'll be a very difficult sell, and presumably the Prime Minister's trying very hard to make sure it's less.
OK, right, coming up after the break, what might be the future for hospitals in East Kent, and are school swimming programmes sinking? We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Paul on Politics, live on KMTV with our guests Simon Cook and Tim Lukchurst. Now, plans to reorganise hospitals in East Kent are in the spotlight, with health chiefs setting out their proposals. Harry Peet went to a crucial meeting where these proposals were discussed.
At the Grand Hotel in Folkestone this morning, health bosses and Kent residents discussed options on how to improve East Kent's hospitals, which are some of the worst in the country. Two main options have been put on the table. The first would see a reshuffle at QEQM, William Harvey and Kent and Canterbury, including A&E services. The other would be a super hospital in Canterbury, funded by Quinn Estates in exchange for 2,000 homes to be built.
National benchmarks that at the moment East Kent is missing, particularly around A&E care, around cancer care, they're really serious, and we really want to look at that. The reason why the hospital has had to move some services out of Canterbury on a temporary basis has been because we haven't got the workforce in East Kent. So what we're doing now is trying to look to develop a system which is sustainable into the future, delivers the care for patients and the quality of the care.
Expanding and using existing parts of K&C Hospital, along with the developer's money, could halve the cost of an outright new hospital in Canterbury, which campaigners say is an ideal location for East Kent.
The thing is that there are going to be some roads onto the A2 and onto the major roads. It's not going to be stuck in the middle of Canterbury. I feel for people there, but of course what they've got to remember is where they're going to go. We're not taking anything away from Ashford. I'm sure services will still be at Ashford, and they'll still be at Margate. It is about this hub making a centre of excellence in the middle so that everybody from everybody around gets the best possible service they can.
While the temperatures outside in Kent plummeted today, inside the Grand Hotel in Folkestone where the meeting was held, the audience's temperatures were rising as those who lived on Kent's coastal and rural towns said that any hospital built in Canterbury could have serious impacts on their healthcare.
Well, my worry is that if Canterbury and this new
hospital goes ahead, what you'll have there is you'll have further time constraints put on the healthcare of people in some of the most rural and deprived areas at the same time. We've also got at the moment with the Kent, the KCC and their cuts to the bus services, with the loss of some hospital buses, this is just going to have further disastrous consequences for local people.
No decision will be made until public consultations next year, meaning that in the meantime, you can have your chance to say how you feel about the plans, which have already had mixed reviews. Harry Peat for KNTV in Folkestone.
Well, Simon Cook, the problem here is that everybody wants to save their own local hospital.
True.
And they're not always that interested in the kind of pan-Kent picture in East Kent. How are you going to persuade people that they need to look at the wider interests of the population?
Well, first of all, it's not my job to persuade them.
How would you?
It's
pretend you're the health service chief and not the county council.
I'm getting so many jobs today. It's fantastic. I think you have to be clear to people that health services is evolving. How health is delivered is evolving. We don't have the general hospitals that we might have had in the post-war period, specialising.
Or the money.
Well, indeed the money, but I think it's more a question that specialising is becoming more and more common. These services are being run together, and much more is being delivered through S-Review type clinics. But I think the key thing is, from my point of view in Canterbury, I go, well, why shouldn't Canterbury have a quality A&E department at the very least, and those sort of things, simply because you look at it, we've got 200,000 people in our district. You look up and down the A2 corridor, you've got another 50,000 each at Dover and Faversham way. That's a sizable number of people without a direct link to an A&E department. It seems perverse to me.
And what do you think about this proposal from the property company Quinn Estates to build the shell of the hospital at Canterbury and leave the NHS to fund the rest of it?
Well, I have to be careful about this because Canterbury is the planning authority on that. So we think a hospital in Canterbury and upgrading the KNC is a good idea, but precisely how that gets developed, that's for whether or not this is an acceptable planning decision is for our planning department and committee to decide. But certainly it's very welcome that something innovative has been put on the table for our the health commissioners to look at. I think it gives more options, and that's the right thing.
More options sometimes creates difficulties, doesn't it, Tim? What's your take on this reorganisation? Getting over the emotional attachment is quite hard, isn't it?
It's hard, but it's a problem all over Britain, and the truth is that modern hospitals need very, very advanced technology. They need things like diagnostic scanners, they need things like robot-operated pharmacies to improve efficiency. And the best way to achieve the sort of efficiencies which deliver that extremely expensive, modern, cutting-edge care is to locate it all under one roof, to ensure that you're using the facilities to the maximum efficiency, and that you can attract the very best staff, and that includes top consultants and top theatre nurses. Now, we've seen all over Britain that works best if you can locate it on one ultra-modern facility with excellent transport facilities, excellent access. I think that that's what we need to do in East Kent.
And the proposal you're most in favour of in terms of citing that citizenship?
I don't have that expertise, Paul, but those are the criteria on which I'd assess it. Where can you locate it, where you can get all of these facilities under one roof, people can get there easily, and you're going to attract a lot of really excellent consultants.
I think that one other thing which we haven't addressed on this is the question that the biggest problem in East Kent is not hospital facilities, it's the staff, and that's why the proposal from the University of Kent and Canterbury Christchurch for a medical school is incredibly welcome, because what we need is many more staff coming out of the universities as doctors and nurses and staying in East Kent.
Hear, hear.
OK, well, the degree of consensus there, that's good. Now, in Kent, research shows that 1 in 3 children that leave primary school do so without knowing how to swim. Are we spending too much time on maths and all those other dreary subjects rather than splashing about in the water? Cameron Tucker reports.
Go! Reach! Long up! Every week here in Tunbridge Wells and across Kent, hundreds of young children splish and splash at swimming classes. Despite the popularity of these classes, a study by the Amateur Swimming Association shows primary school swimming has taken a dive. 1 in 3 primary school leavers are unable to swim, up from the previously reported figure of 1 in 5. That means around 200,000 UK children left primary this summer without achieving the national curriculum target of swimming 25 metres unaided by the age of 11.
Since 1994, swimming provision at primary schools has been in the national curriculum. So it's a figure that shouldn't be the case because all children should currently, and for the last 20 years, have had the opportunity to be able to attend swimming classes through schools. And I think that's the biggest concern, the fact that that hasn't been happening.
A lack of funding, cost of training teachers, transport between schools and pools, and a focus on science and maths as opposed to swimming. Just some of the reasons why school swimming appears to be sinking. Kent County Council have said, barring academies, swimming should be more central to the school curriculum, but there's a limit to what local authorities can do.
We've certainly always sought to support schools in what they do on swimming, so we have a policy that's designed to assist schools in how they address some of them. Health and safety issues, the use of another pool, a range of sort of practical issues that gives them support in that. We always seek still to provide a conference and indeed some training for PE coordinators, and we do notice whenever that happens that swimming comes up.
The lack of provision has also raised alarms over safety. About 300 to 400 drown every year. More children without basic swimming skills could have a troubling impact on these figures. Cameron Tucker for KMTV.
Now, Tim, the thing that strikes me about swimming at schools is that schools find it quite difficult to arrange swimming classes, getting their kids to the swimming pool. What's the answer?
Well, I've probably a rather perverse view on this, Paul. I think it's the parents' responsibility. I think schools should concentrate on teaching core curriculum subjects such as reading, writing and arithmetic, and that swimming, whilst it's a wonderful addition, is something that parents have to help to deliver. Now, I'd add to that of course children need facilities in which to learn to swim, and there are some great facilities here in Kent, and perhaps we need to get our schools to share them better, particularly our excellent independent schools in Kent who often have their own pools and could share them with state schools.
Simon, drop swimming from the curriculum and get the parents to sort it all out?
Certainly, I think Tim's right. Certainly, it's a key life skill, and parents should be encouraging children. And if the school is not providing it, they should still make sure that their children are capable of swimming. And not only the independent schools, but all councils provide swimming pools. And indeed, my daughter learned to swim in the Canterbury swimming pool. So it's something that can be done, and is an important life skill, and very important that we all learn.
It's a life skill, Tim. That is a fair point, isn't it?
I think it is a life skill, Paul, but I also think that if someone doesn't want to learn to swim, you will never teach them. I've got 4 children. 3 of them can swim, was my point, and one of them has never learned, and her school had a great swimming pool. You could throw her into it and she would still sink like a stone. Not that I would have suggested that.
Okay, well, we're going to return to our story at the start of the programme on Kent County Council's bus cuts, and we've had a letter signed by 10 Kent MPs, which indicates they're very unhappy with the County Council's proposals, and a quite extraordinary letter asking KCC to reconsider these plans and actually mentioning the 15% pay rise that County Councils awarded themselves. For Conservative MPs to launch such an uncompromising attack is rather interesting, isn't it, Tim? I
think it's very interesting indeed. It's a majority of the Kent Conservative MPs, and it includes a couple of government ministers. There's obviously real anger. They obviously think their constituents care deeply about this.
Do you think this is going to force a climb down this letter?
I think it's a very welcome intervention in this, because they're representing their constituents in what they feel. And I think making sure that KCC really think hard and fast about this to make sure this is the right decision, I think that's absolutely what they should be doing.
And we'll have to end it there, but time's run out again. Thanks to our guests for coming into the studio to share their thoughts. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, you can catch up on all the latest political news by logging on to kentonline.co.uk, listening to KMFM. And that's it. Thanks for watching.